Hey guys, tonight we're trading your cozy bed for a damp canvas tent somewhere deep in Union territory. Don't worry, it's only mildly miserable. You're a soldier now, drafted or perhaps volunteered in a burst of idealism you immediately regretted. It's the American Civil War, and somehow, despite the mud, the lice, and the looming threat of diarrhea, you've managed to make it this far. But fair warning, you probably wouldn't survive this. Like, not even through the first week. Still, let's see how far you can fake it, shall we? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake, drop your location and what time it is where you are. I like knowing where in the world we're sharing these sleepy stories. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's still dark when you wake up. Not the peaceful kind of dark either, the Civil War kind. Cold, damp, and a little bit greasy, somehow. You're lying on a thin bedroll that doesn't so much cushion you from the ground as it lovingly introduces you to every root and rock beneath your back. Your tent smells like mildew, old leather, and something faintly rodent adjacent. It's made of canvas stretched so tight it crackles every time you shift your weight, which you do carefully to avoid brushing against the side. That's where condensation collects overnight, and there's no faster way to get a surprise face full of icy water than daring to touch the interior wall. Outside, a slow drizzle taps on the tent like the world's laziest drum line, and somewhere not far away, someone is already coughing like they've swallowed a live raccoon. Welcome to camp. Your boots, still damp from yesterday's march, are right where you left them, meaning nowhere near where you need them. They've been walked in, soaked, half-dried by a smoky fire, and walked in again. So now, they carry the comforting texture of wet sandpaper and smell like fermented shoe soup. You jam your feet into them anyway, because that's what soldiers do. You, dear listener, are now a soldier. A groggy, slightly itchy, mildly annoyed soldier with a long day ahead and a deeply skeptical stomach. The morning air bites as you step outside the tent. It's not dramatic like a storm or snowfall. It's just a sort of constant, nagging cold that nestles into your bones and hums there all day. Your breath fogs instantly, and every surface, from your rifle leaning on a tent pole to the latrine shovel, is coated in a fine layer of dew and disapproval. The sky's a low, gray sheet, not quite committing to rain, but definitely not letting the sun have a say in anything. You join the slow shuffle of fellow soldiers toward the center of camp. No one's talking much, just boots in mud, coughs, and the occasional curse muttered under breath when someone steps in something unidentifiable and squelchy. You're all wrapped in those standard issue wool blankets like miserable little burritos, eyes still half shut, muttering about coffee like it's going to save your lives. And maybe it will. Someone started a fire, and the smoke cuts through the wet air like a memory of warmth. A battered tin pot is balanced precariously on a few coals, containing what the camp swears is coffee, but could just as easily be water reused from someone's laundry. It's thick, dark, and somehow both too hot and not hot enough. You pour yourself a tin cup, the rim sharp against your cracked lips, and take a sip. It tastes like someone strained it through a dirty sock full of regret. But it's warm, and the caffeine does its work. Around you, others are chewing on hardtack, those dry, barely edible biscuits that clack against your teeth like tiny bricks. If you're lucky, yours doesn't have bugs. If you're unlucky, you're already used to the bugs, and just consider them extra protein. A joke goes around camp about how you're more likely to break a tooth than bite through it, but no one really laughs. Everyone's busy chewing like they're trying to win a contest in jaw strength. It's a weird, communal moment. Shared misery, steam rising from the coffee, men wrapped in soggy uniforms shivering around a fire like extras in a historical reenactment gone very wrong. You glance at your hands. They're dirty, not the kind of dirty that washes off, but a deep, ingrained grime earned from digging, marching, sleeping on the ground, and forgetting what clean feels like. Your fingernails are chipped, the skin cracked and dry, and your knuckles ache from the cold. You flex them out of habit, knowing they'll be holding your musket soon, and not just for fun. Today might be a drill day, or a march, or, if you're really unlucky, a letter from command that has everyone scrambling into action with nothing more than a handful of hardtack crumbs and last night's half-slept dreams. Around you, the camp starts coming alive in its own sluggish way. They're shouting from one tent, probably about someone stealing someone else's blanket. A mule brays from the far edge of camp, sounding vaguely judgmental. A group of soldiers is gathering for inspection, shirts half-tucked, boots unlaced, rifles slung over shoulders with the casual elegance of people who know no one's truly ready for anything before breakfast. And through it all, there's this dull sense of waiting, of life pause between orders. That's what most of war feels like, it turns out. Not charging across battlefields in slow motion, but a series of endless mornings like this where everything smells like smoke and wet wool, and your stomach won't stop wondering if it's breakfast or just nerves. You can hear a drummer somewhere lazily tapping out a rhythm to signal the start of whatever this day will be. It's not dramatic, not even really musical. It's more like background noise in a particularly bleak dream. You sigh and adjust your belt, the brass buckle already tarnished, and try not to think about the fact that your socks haven't been properly dry since last Thursday. You see someone sharpening a bayonet near the supply tent. He's doing it with the focus of someone who's either very serious or very bored, probably both. His hands are steady, his eyes half-lidded, like he's been doing this for years, maybe in his sleep. You wonder briefly if he's ever used it, if he's ever had to get that close to another man, but you shake the thought away. It's not something to dwell on before the second cup of sock-water coffee. Nearby, a group of younger recruits is laughing over something, probably a crude joke or some unfortunate latrine incident. One of them has a harmonica and plays a few ragged notes before someone throws a boot at him. He laughs and plays louder, off-key and enthusiastic. It's oddly comforting. A historical truth? Most Civil War soldiers were just like this, young, tired, perpetually underfed, and completely unsure what they were doing. The average Union soldier was in his mid-20s, though many were teenagers, and some were grizzled older men with more scars than sense. Lesser-known fact, some of these men would carry photographs of their sweethearts or mothers tucked inside their coats, wrapped in oilcloth or hidden inside pockets sewn shut. Tiny reminders of home, pressed close to their hearts even as they marched into something that would try to break them. Historians still wonder what kept morale alive in those early mornings. Was it belief in a cause? Fear of shame? The thought of going home again someday? Or was it just the stubborn routine? The fire, the coffee, the bitter taste of hardtack, and the way the sunrise always looked a little like hope, even when it brought nothing but another long, cold day? You shift your weight again, adjusting your rifle strap and tucking your hands into your sleeves. The captain's voice cuts across the field, barking instructions that are somehow both too loud and completely unintelligible. You don't need to understand. You just need to move when the others move. That's how this works. You fall into line as the camp begins to form its morning shape. Tents folding down, fires being stamped out, men falling into rank with all the energy of exhausted cats being herded into formation. You exhale and taste the smoke still clinging to the back of your throat. Your muscles ache in familiar ways, and your boots squelch again, as if to remind you they're coming too whether you like it or not. Somewhere a crow calls out. The sky is still that heavy gray, unchanged since you woke. Another day begins. You shuffle toward what passes for breakfast in this damp little corner of army life. A weak column of men already winding its way to the open fire where the cook, if you can even call him that, grumbles like a disgruntled raccoon in a borrowed apron. You're not sure if his name is officially Cook, or if he's just the one guy who didn't duck fast enough when someone said, "Who here knows how to boil water?" Either way, he's your culinary overlord now, armed with a dented ladle and a deadpan stare. The morning fog hangs low, weaving between tints and muskets, curling into your nostrils with a mixture of wood smoke, boiled salt pork, and whatever unfortunate thing is currently being scorched in that battered iron pan. You join the others at the head of the line, which smells like wet wool and unbrushed teeth, your tin cup in one hand and your deeply lowered expectations in the other. A nearby barrel holds water that's technically been filtered, though filtered through what is an open question best left unanswered. You dip your cup in and add the steaming black liquid from the cook's pot, which they all insist is coffee. It's thick and bitter, as if it spent some quality time aging in a boot, but it's hot and vaguely stimulating, and that's good enough. At your feet, your breakfast rations await. Hardtack, an unholy fusion of flour, water, and a total lack of mercy. It looks like a biscuit, feels like a brick, and tastes like the air inside a long-forgotten barn. You bite into it with the cautious resignation of a man unsure whether he's eating food or entering combat with a snack. It crumbles like drywall and leaves a chalky taste in your mouth, and you already know you'll be chewing this until lunch. You sit on a damp stump next to someone named Reynolds. He might have been a farmer once, or maybe he just smells like one. He nods at you, sips his coffee, and proceeds to hammer his hardtack against the edge of his cup in an effort to soften it with sheer spite. Around you, the other men grunt, chew, or stare listlessly at the ground like it might eventually give them answers. Conversations are sparse, mostly grunts about the weather, muttered theories about troop movements, or loud complaints about the quality of the salt pork, which resembles an old bandage and tastes like defeat. If you're lucky, the cook has thrown in a piece of salted beef that's only marginally less chewy than your boots. If you're really lucky, there are beans, overcooked and undersalted but warm and more exciting than the usual meal roulette. A particularly chatty soldier across the fire is telling the story of how he once found a weevil in his hardtack and named it General Grant. Apparently, he let it live for 2 days as a pet before accidentally eating it in his sleep. No one laughs, but someone offers a solemn nod. That's about as high as humor gets before 9 in the morning out here. The camp's rhythm begins to shift. Tin cups clink together, boots scrape the dirt. Someone starts whistling a tune that sounds suspiciously like Camptown races, but keeps dropping notes like they're optional. The sun, if you can call it that, is beginning to burn through the fog, spreading a dull yellow smear across the sky. It casts long, faint shadows on the muddy ground, where every depression is a boot print and every puddle reflects your bedraggled face like it's saying, "You really thought this would be fun?" You toss the last crumbs of your hardtack to a nearby squirrel, who sniffs it and walks away in silent judgment. The coffee, meanwhile, is beginning to kick in, not in a pleasant way, but in that my stomach is now having a meeting about this kind of way. Civil War coffee is legendary, and not in a good way. It's made from whatever is available. Actual beans if you're near a supply wagon, roasted acorns, or chicory root if you're not. And God knows, what if someone's been experimenting again? One common legend among soldiers was that if you dropped a bullet in your cup, it would either dissolve or come out cleaner. One guy once claimed he used his coffee to clean rust off his bayonet, and honestly, it worked too well. Despite all this, there's something comforting in the ritual of it. The early morning routine, the fire, the bitter sip, the too quiet chatter, is what gives the day its shape. It's the one part of the morning that doesn't involve marching or yelling or relearning how to properly shoulder arm for the 100th time. You take another sip, scald your tongue slightly, and listen as Reynolds reads aloud from a newspaper clipping he's carried in his coat for weeks now. It's from back home, printed on paper so soft and worn it could be mistaken for linen. The article is about a horse race, or maybe a political rally. It's hard to tell through the faded ink, but he reads it like it matters, like every syllable brings him a little closer to home. You close your eyes for a second and imagine being somewhere else. Maybe back at your mother's table, where breakfast doesn't require a knife and a prayer, and the only smoke comes from a wood stove, not a fire someone forgot to extinguish. A true historical detail? Civil War coffee obsession was real. Union soldiers were known to measure their day by their coffee ration and even mutinied or grumbled loudly when supplies ran low. Some would roast green beans over open fires, grind them with rifle butts, and boil them in tin pots until the concoction resembled something vaguely consumable. It was less about flavor and more about ritual, a moment of normalcy in a world where normal had taken a sabbatical. Lesser known detail: there are recorded instances of soldiers forming coffee clubs. Yes, coffee clubs, where they'd pool rations and take turns brewing the best batch possible, often judged by who could stomach it without swearing. Imagine risking your life for a bean water brew that barely qualifies as potable and still calling it the highlight of your day. Historians still debate whether the Union's superior access to coffee had a psychological effect on morale. Did that bitter brew help soldiers stay alert, connected, grounded in something familiar? Or was it just another coping mechanism in a war that slowly unraveled every expectation of civility? You knock the last dregs from your tin cup and rise, stretching your back until it pops like old furniture. Your blanket is folded and packed, your rifle slung across your shoulder, and the familiar weight of your cartridge box presses against your hip like an impatient reminder. Somewhere in your pocket, tucked deep, is the stub of a pencil and a folded note you keep meaning to finish, a letter to someone back home you haven't heard from in weeks. You'll write more tonight, maybe, if you're not too tired. Maybe. For now, the morning meal is over. You're not full, not even close, but you're not empty either. And that, in war, is what passes for success. There's a distant voice yelling now, probably the lieutenant, whose hobby seems to be yelling at people for not standing in places they weren't told to be in the first place. You shuffle back into formation, the men around you doing the same, cups tucked into belts or tossed into the cleaning bucket with a loud clatter. A drummer picks up a cadence again, and the day begins in earnest. Not with a bang, but with the sound of marching feet and the reluctant creak of leather straps. The fire is still burning low, flickering behind you as you walk away, the smell of charred beans and scorched bacon lingering like a last, greasy memory of breakfast. And as the wind picks up slightly, teasing at your coat, you can't help but think that maybe, just maybe, the coffee wasn't that bad after all. Just don't tell the squirrel. The sky's pale and sluggish as you fall into step, your boots squishing through half-dried mud while your body begs to crawl back into the stiff embrace of your bedroll. Lice and all. But instead you're here, lined up with 100 other groggy soldiers, all of you blinking at the world like you've been dragged out of a fever dream. Your uniform, if you can call it that without laughing, is an all-you-can-scratch buffet of itchy wool and questionable tailoring. You tug at the collar again, but it's a useless gesture. It always feels like someone measured your neck with a grudge and then stitched the thing shut just to spite you. The trousers sag in odd places and ride up in others, and the whole ensemble smells vaguely like damp sheep and powder boredom. Your jacket, union-issued and stuffed with whatever passed for insulation back then, is only slightly more comforting than wearing a wet rug. But it's yours. You share this woolen misery with every other soul in camp. A scratchy, blue badge of shared suffering and the unfortunate reality of mass-produced fashion in the 1860s. And of course, it gets worse when you move. You march, you drill, you hoist your musket, and every movement is a friction-fueled festival of heat and discomfort. The wool rubs at your shoulders, your thighs, your underarms. It's a full-body exfoliation you didn't ask for, and you're pretty sure you've developed a rash shaped exactly like the eagle stamped on your belt buckle. Today is a drill day, which is to say, it's like war, but with more yelling and fewer bullets. You're out on the field now, shoulder to shoulder with a ragtag line of men who range from possibly competent to definitely still drunk from last night. The officer in charge, Lieutenant Merton, a man whose mustache enters the room 5 seconds before he does, is already barking orders that sound like they were designed more to confuse than instruct. He yells shoulder arms, and half the line smacks themselves in the head with their rifles. You, wisely, just copy the guy next to you, who seems to have developed a method of moving in perfect synchronization while maintaining an expression of complete emotional detachment. He's either a veteran or has completely disassociated. Either way, he's your hero now. The musket in your hands is the Springfield Model 1861, which sound impressive until you remember it's basically 5 feet of wood and metal designed to misfire the moment you really need it. You've already had to clean it so many times your fingers smell like oil and melancholy. It's not light either. After 30 minutes of drills, your arms burn like you've been carrying bricks to someone else's war. You swing it up, swing it down, practice bayonet lunges in perfect synchronization with the unit, and then get yelled at because your heel was slightly off. It's like ballet, but if the instructor hated you and the costumes came with weaponized armpit sweat. The sergeant now wants everyone to form ranks, which involves more yelling, some frantic shuffling, and one poor guy getting hit in the shin with the butt of a musket. You're suddenly very aware of how heavy everything feels. The rifle, the cartridge box, the belt, the canteen that always leaks just enough to make your side feel damp and vaguely suspicious. Even your cap is heavy today, its brim flopping slightly from a morning dew, shading your eyes, but also dripping occasionally onto your nose. You wonder who designed this uniform. Some quartermaster far away, probably sitting in a warm office drinking decent coffee, thought, yes, wool. That'll breathe well in Virginia heat. You suppress the urge to laugh. You're already hot and itchy and sore, and the sun hasn't even fully committed to showing up yet. You go through the formations again. Rank and file, will left, will right, fire by volley, fire by rank. It's tedious and repetitive, which is the point. Whereas mostly waiting, drilling, and doing things over and over until your muscles can do them without involving your brain. You begin to lose track of time. Your feet move on instinct. Your musket snaps to your shoulder with a practiced clunk, and your ears stop hearing the lieutenant's voice as words. It's more like white noise with a self-righteous lilt. Your shirt clings to your back now, a second skin of sweat and despair, and the wool has begun to chafe something fierce. You can feel the rash spreading. A bee buzzes near your head, lingers ominously, and wisely decides you're not worth the effort. One guy near the back trips during a bayonet charge drill, and the entire front line nearly dominoes into one another. No one's hurt, but the sergeant sighs the sigh of a man wondering what decisions led him here. Still, there's something almost hypnotic in the routine. The crack of boots, the click of musket hammers, the lone mutter of commands. It's like a terrible orchestra tuning up for a show no one wants to see. And through all the mess, your body adjusts. It learns. Your fingers find a right grip. Your posture straightens. You start to move not because you're told, but because it feels like the only logical thing to do. You're part of a line now, not just a person. A number, a body, a shape in blue wool against the dull green of the drill field. And strange as it sounds, it's kind of comforting. Not pleasant, not enjoyable, but familiar. Predictable. Safer than battle, at least. You see the same faces around you each time you pivot, hear the same groans and complaints after each maneuver, and feel, weirdly, like you're all in on a very long, very elaborate joke at your own expense. A historical fact worth noting. Union soldiers drilled often and drilled hard. The belief was that constant repetition could make even the most frightened man function like a cog in a larger machine when bullets started flying. And for many, it worked. Battles were often decided by which side kept formation longer under fire, whose line didn't crumble when everything else did. A lesser-known tidbit. Some units had their own unofficial drill songs. Nonsense rhymes or chant soldiers would mutter under their breath to remember steps, distract from pain, or just annoy their commanding officers. One popular favorite involved mocking a particularly pompous colonel's fashion choices with a jingle about his shiny buttons and oversized boots. Historians still debate whether constant drilling actually improved morale or just kept men too tired to mutiny. Some argue it gave soldiers structure, helped them cope with the chaos. Others say it was just a way to burn daylight between letters home and the next skirmish. You're not sure either, but you are sure your right boot has begun eating your sock alive. After 2 hours of this glorious dance of futility, the command finally comes to fall out, and you stagger back to a nearby stump, peel off your jacket, and start scratching furiously at the seams of your shirt. Reynolds sits beside you again, also scratching, both of you sharing the kind of silence that says, "I hate this, but I hate it slightly less with you here." He lifts his shirt to reveal a welt so angry it should have its own zip code. You nod in sympathy and offer a half-eaten piece of hardtack as tribute. Around you, men collapse into the grass or sit with their backs to trees, fanning themselves with hats, or simply lying motionless like wool-covered corpses. Someone has unbuttoned their trousers entirely and is airing out parts of themselves you prefer not to think about. Another soldier uses his bayonet as a back scratcher with the kind of enthusiasm normally reserved for chasing off bears. You lean back, arms behind your head, feeling the sun finally warm your face through the lingering clouds. In the distance, you hear someone singing, a low, half-remembered hymn, the kind that sounds like it should echo through a church instead of a field full of sweaty men. A moment of calm settles. The sergeant has stopped yelling. Lieutenant Merton has disappeared, probably to go practice his mustache in a mirror. The wind picks up slightly, rustling the grass, and for a second, you forget the itch, the ache, the scratchy wool. You just breathe, and then someone lets out a scream, loud, exaggerated, theatrical. It's Jenkins, pretending he's been shot by the drill itself. He falls dramatically to the ground, clutching his chest, muttering something about the death of dignity. The camp erupts into laughter, genuine, full-throated, glorious laughter. Even Reynolds chuckles, and for once, the sound isn't tinged with exhaustion. Just humor. Pure, simple humor. Maybe it's the heat. Maybe it's the shared suffering. Or maybe you've all finally gone mad together. Either way, it helps. You stand, roll your shoulders, and tug your jacket back on despite your body's protests. The wool scratches anew, but you're used to it now. You fasten the buttons, adjust your belt, and fall back into line. There will be more drills, more yelling, maybe a march after lunch if the officers are feeling particularly cruel. But for now, you're standing tall. Scratchy, sweaty, half sane, but tall. A soldier, for better or worse, in a blue uniform that's as much armor as it is punishment. By midday, the air hangs heavy with the kind of dull warmth that makes your uniform feel like it's slowly turning into a wool-lined oven. And that's when the order comes down. March. Not, we'll head out later when it's cooler, or maybe tomorrow if it rains. Just a sharp bark from someone with more stripes than you and less patience than a hornet in a pickle jar. So you groan, wipe your sleeve across your already sweaty face, hoist your gear, and start walking. There's no great send-off, no trumpets or speeches, just the creak of leather straps, the familiar metallic clink of your cartridge box, and the soft, unrelenting squelch of your boots in mud that doesn't care if it's historic. The road ahead stretches like a sentence you're only halfway through serving, winding past thin woods and tired fence posts that lean like they, too, are over this whole war thing. You shift your musket on your shoulder and try to focus on your steps, because the moment you start counting how many miles are left, your legs will turn mutinous. The officers claim it's only 10 miles, but that's 10 officer miles, which is code for somewhere between 12 and forever. The real problem isn't the distance, though. It's the shoes. Oh, the shoes. Issued by the Union in bulk and designed with all the ergonomic brilliance of a cinder block. Your brogans are flat, stiff, and shaped like someone guessed what a foot might be, then gave up halfway. There's no left or right, just shoe. And they fit like two angry bricks conspiring to murder your arches in slow motion. You tied bits of cloth around your toes to soften the blow, but the blisters formed anyway, first like innocent little bubbles, then like angry red moons spreading with each step. The road starts to turn rocky, and every stone feels like a personal insult. The sun burns higher, casting short shadows that offer no mercy. You pass trees whose leaves hang limp in the heat, birds too tired to chirp, and the occasional farmhouse set back from the road, its windows dark and its occupants invisible. Some folks wave from porches, others just watch in silence, their faces unreadable, like they're deciding whether to pity you or spit. You can feel the eyes of children peering from behind shutters, and you wonder what they're thinking. Do you look like heroes? Or just very sweaty men playing soldier in someone else's front yard? There's a group of cows in a nearby field, staring with their big blank eyes as you pass. One lets out a low moo, and someone near you mutters, "That's about how I feel too, buddy." A few men laugh, then return to silence. You've all been walking for about 40 minutes, and it already feels like hours. Your canteen sloshes lightly at your hip, but you're trying to ration it, because nobody wants to be the idiot who drinks it all by mile 3 and has to beg for a swig later. You take a tiny sip anyway, just enough to wet your tongue, and nearly gag. It's warm and tastes faintly like the tin cup you forgot to rinse last night. Delicious. As you march, your mind starts to wander. It's one of the few things allowed to. You think about home, the way the front door creaked when you opened it, the smell of your ma's cooking, your sister's singing voice as she did chores she claimed to hate but secretly enjoyed. You wonder if the dog still sleeps in your bed or if he's claimed it entirely by now. It's a good distraction until your blister pops. It's sudden, sharp, and wet, and you don't scream, but you do let out a noise that's somewhere between a hiss and a whimper. Nobody says anything because everyone has at least one foot that feels like it's being chewed on by a very small, very angry bear. You grit your teeth and keep going because there's no other option. A soldier who falls behind is a soldier who gets left behind. And the only thing worse than walking with blisters is hobbling with shame. The line moves on. You pass over a creek and hear the collective groan of men longing to stop and soak their feet, but the sergeant waves you on. No rest yet, just a slight downhill slope where your boots slide in the gravel and you nearly topple over, barely catching yourself on your musket. A corporal behind you isn't so lucky. He goes down with a grunt, curses, and scrambles back up with the grim dignity of someone who will never speak of this again. The sun finally dips behind some clouds, giving you a moment of shadow, but the relief is fleeting. Your uniform sticks to your back, the strap across your chest digs deeper with every step, and the rhythmic motion of your gear jostling is starting to feel less like movement and more like punishment. And yet, oddly enough, it's peaceful in a way, monotonous, almost meditative. Your legs move, your arms swing, and your thoughts drift in a slow, hazy fog. The marching rhythm becomes your world. Step, shift, jostle, breathe. Repeat. It's not until someone starts singing that you realize how quiet it had been. A low voice, probably Jenkins again, starts a folk tune about whiskey and women and a pig that could dance. It's terrible and out of key, but others join in, some clapping weakly, some just mouthing along. The tune drifts through the line like a thread, binding you all together in this shared shuffle through nowhere. Historically speaking, soldiers in both armies marched almost constantly, sometimes 20 miles a day, sometimes more, and the toll it took was often worse than battle. Blisters, sunstroke, exhaustion, and collapsed arches were common, and many men lost their toenails from miles of pressure and poor boots. What's less well known is that some regiments developed rituals to break the monotony. They'd assign unofficial pace callers, men who'd sing, shout, or whistle to keep the group together and stave off fatigue. One regiment even elected a march captain, whose only job was to make jokes at the officer's expense. Some historians still argue about whether these long treks hardened soldiers or just wore them down into numb obedience. Was it a form of discipline or just survival through distraction? You're not sure, but you know one thing. If this road doesn't end soon, you're going to throw your boots into the nearest pond and finish the march barefoot like a lunatic. Eventually, mercifully, there's a command from up ahead. Halt. You stop mid-step, legs still twitching with phantom motion, and let your musket drop from your shoulder with a dull thud. Your hands tremble slightly as you rub your feet through your boots, knowing full well you don't want to see what's happening down there. Men around you groan, flop onto grass, or peel off their jackets in slow, dramatic fashion, like molting birds too exhausted to care how ridiculous they look. You sit heavily on a rock, lean back, and breathe for what feels like the first time all day. Reynolds flops beside you, opens his canteen, and hands it to you without a word. You drink warm, stale, glorious water and pass it back. A small breeze stirs the trees above you, rustling the leaves in a way that feels almost merciful. Somewhere, someone's already started a small fire. You're not sure who had the energy, but bless them because the smell of wood smoke feels like hope. You close your eyes and let the rhythm of your heartbeat slow. Your muscles unclench one at a time. And for just a moment, the war is far away. Then the lieutenant rides past, casually mentioning that you've got another 2 miles before camp. Everyone groans. Jenkins loudly declares he's going to dig a hole and hide in it. You all laugh, but then get up like you always do. Because there's nothing else to do. You shoulder your musket, square your aching feet, and start walking again. 1 step at a time, 1 mile at a time, until you make it to whatever patch of ground you're allowed to call home for the night. And maybe, just maybe, there'll be a fire waiting. When you finally drag yourself into camp that evening, boots heavier than sin, shoulders sore enough to qualify as injuries, you're not thinking about glory or politics or even the war anymore. You're just thinking about sitting down. And maybe, if the universe is in a generous mood, getting your hands on a piece of salted meat that doesn't smell like a barn floor. The camp is already a sprawl of half-collapsed tents, scattered equipment, and soldiers doing their best impression of discarded scarecrows. There's smoke curling lazily from a few cook fires, the light orange glow a welcome signal that somebody's figured out how to turn twigs and a bit of hope into warmth. Your hands shake slightly as you set down your musket, lean it gently against a stump, and lower yourself onto a patch of grass that feels like the softest mattress you've ever known. Your feet throb like tiny revolutionaries planning a mutiny in your boots. But before you can even properly appreciate the sensation of not moving, the mail call goes up, a voice hollering from somewhere near the captain's tent, stretched into a rough echo by fatigue and distance. Everyone perks up, just a little. It's a sound that slices through the haze of exhaustion like a clear bell in fog. Mail, letters, news, connection. You get up slower than you'd like, knees popping, and shuffle toward the source of the voice, falling into the semi-hopeful cluster of other soldiers, each of you wondering if today might be the day. The sergeant is standing beside a burlap sack that's seen better days. Well, one better day, maybe sometime before the war began. He pulls out each folded envelope with the care of a magician revealing cards, reading names aloud with the dramatic pause of someone who knows how desperate everyone is. McAllister, Reynolds, Jenkins. Each name lands like a stone in the pond of the crowd, creating small ripples of disappointment for those not called and short bursts of delight for those who are. You stand there, shifting from foot to foot, silently praying to whoever might be listening that your name comes next. You think of your sister, who writes in neat loops and never misses a week. You think of your mother, who always tucks in some dried lavender with her letters, even though it arrives crushed and barely scented. The sergeant squints at a name, frowns, then reads it slowly. Yours. You blink. For a moment, you thought you imagined it. But no, there is again. You push forward and take the letter like it's something sacred. It's already softened by the journey, the edges frayed, a smudge of ink in the corner. You hold it in both hands like it might vanish. You return to your patch of grass, now officially a throne, and open the letter with careful fingers. The script is familiar, comforting. Your sisters, judging by the swoop and the lowercase g's and the habit of underlining every third word for emphasis. She tells you about home. The chickens are laying again. The dog's gone half-deaf and now barks at shadows. The neighbor's cow wandered into their yard and refused to leave until bribed with an entire loaf of bread. It's small stuff, mundane, absolutely perfect. She says your mother misses you, but won't admit it. That the pastor gave a very long sermon on the importance of patience, which no one listened to. That your uncle insists the war will be over any day now, even though he said the same thing last month. You read the words slowly, savoring each sentence like it's a spoonful of honey. Around you, other men do the same, hunched over their own pieces of home. Some cry, quietly, not dramatically, but in a way that looks like their eyes are just too full. Others read aloud, turning their private joy into a communal moment. Jenkins, predictably, announces that his girl back home has sent him a drawing of herself in a bonnet that he insists is very flattering. Though everyone agrees it looks like a potato with a hat. He beams anyway. And then there are the men who don't get letters. They sit quietly, some pretending not to care, others folding and refolding old ones like talismans. You glance at one soldier, Collins maybe, who has a letter so worn it's barely legible, but he reads it like it's brand new. You wonder who it's from. A wife? A brother? Somebody lost? You don't ask. No one asks. The men without mail retreat slightly, melting into the dusk, their silence heavier than the rest of you want to admit. You wish you could lend them part of your letter, like you would a blanket or a bite of hardtack. But letters don't work like that. They're stitched into the soul of the reader. They carry the scent of home, the rhythm of voices, the shape of memories. Sharing them is possible, but it's never quite the same. You tuck the letter carefully into the inside pocket of your coat, close to your chest. It's one of the few possessions you'd fight to keep. Not for value, but for meaning. You feel a little lighter now, like the miles you walked today didn't weigh quite so much. Like the blisters on your feet are somehow less angry because someone out there remembers who you are. You lean back against your gear and watch the sky shift from dull gray to soft violet. Stars begin to prick through, faint at first, then clearer. The breeze carries the scent of pine and wood smoke, and whatever mystery meat Jenkins is currently overcooking near the fire. You hear someone playing a harmonica off-key in the distance, and it almost sounds like music if you tilt your head and use your imagination. One historical truth stands out here. Letters were lifelines. Soldiers cherished them more than pay or rations, and the Union Army alone handled over 1 million pieces of mail per month during the war. They wrote on everything, scraps of paper, the backs of maps, even bits of cloth when paper ran short. And when paper was plentiful, letters became miniature journals, prayers, love notes, desperate updates. But here's the lesser-known quirk. Sometimes soldiers would send letters to themselves, not out of vanity, but to game the system, writing a note, mailing it home, then asking family to write back using the return address. This guaranteed they'd get something eventually, even if it started with their own hand. It's a little sad, a little clever, and perfectly human. Historians still debate the emotional toll of uneven mail, how getting a letter could lift a man's spirit, while not getting one might crush it. Was the morale boost strong enough to matter in combat performance? Or did it just prolong the ache of homesickness? You're not sure, but you know that reading those familiar words made the weight of your gear and the stink of your socks easier to bear. The fire crackles louder now, logs shifting, embers lifting into the sky like tiny stars that got confused about their altitude. You sit with Reynolds, who got a letter too, though he doesn't say from who. He just smiles more than usual and hums quietly, which is his way of being happy. You eat slowly, a chunk of bread, a bit of jerky, while the sounds of camp settle into their nighttime rhythm. A low murmur of voices, occasional laughter, the whisper of someone saying grace, the distant call of a whippoorwill. The night cools, and you pull your coat tighter around yourself, not just against the temperature, but against the ache of being far from everything that made you you. The letter in your pocket warms your chest like a coal wrapped in paper. You tap it lightly, just once as if to say thank you. And somewhere nearby, someone sings a lullaby from home, voice wavering, sweet and cracked. You recognize the melody. You hum along, barely audible, just enough to join the sound without disrupting it. And for the first time in a long while, you don't dread what comes next. You wake before dawn not because you want to, but because your back has lodged an official complaint with your entire spinal cord. And the ground beneath you, hard-packed, uneven, and covered in the kind of dew that seeps through blankets like a cold whisper, has become actively hostile. The chirping of some far too enthusiastic birds doesn't help either, and neither does the distant, inevitable voice of a sergeant calling for morning duty in a tone that suggests he hasn't enjoyed a full night's sleep since the war started. You groan, roll onto your side, and immediately regret it as your hip connects with a root sharp enough to qualify as weaponized landscaping. There's no snooze button here, no pillow to flip, just the reality of army life, where your bed is a patch of earth, your alarm is someone yelling your name incorrectly, and your mattress has rocks in it. You sit up slowly, blinking into the gray light of early morning, feeling the crust of sleep in your eyes and the stiffness of everything else. Around you, camp is beginning to stir. Blankets rustle, boots thud onto the ground, and someone, somewhere, is already coughing like they've swallowed a pine cone. The fire has died to a few glowing embers, and a column of smoke snakes upward like a ghost with nowhere to go. The smell of ashes clings to your clothes, your hair, even your breath, and somehow it's comforting now. You're not even mad about it. Ash and sweat have become your cologne. Oda still not dead. You shuffle to your feet, stretch your arms toward a sky that hasn't decided if it wants to be sunny or just vaguely disappointing, and take stock of your surroundings. Your boots, left just outside your bedroll to air out, are now soaked with dew and somehow even less supportive than they were yesterday, which is impressive considering they already had the emotional stability of a bread crust. You jam your feet into them anyway, wincing as the stiff leather wraps around your still blistered heels like a cruel hug. Nearby, Reynolds is grumbling about a dream where he was back home and the breakfast was so good he cried in his sleep. You nod in solemn understanding. Last night, you dreamed of a feather mattress and woke up chewing your blanket. Classic. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is being reheated over what remains of the fire. Yesterday's beans, some mystery meat that may or may not have been cooked through the first time, and the ever-present hardtack, which now has the added texture of midnight humidity. You take a seat on a log still damp from last night's rain. Accept your tin plate from the cook and dig in with the enthusiasm of a man who knows he needs calories more than dignity. The beans are slightly better this time, which probably just means your standards have hit rock bottom. You eat in silence, letting the warmth spread through your chest, grateful for even the smallest comfort. Once the last bite is down and the tin plate is licked clean, yes, you started doing that now, because soap is rationed and dishwashing is a luxury, comes the part of the morning nobody likes to talk about, latrine duty. Because unfortunately, when you put a few hundred men together in a field with limited supplies, things begin to, quite literally, pile up. And today, lucky you, it's your turn to help dig. The tools are basic, shovels with splintered handles and tin buckets for moving dirt. And the smell is enough to make your eyes water before you've even reached the designated dig zone. It's in a far corner of camp, downwind, where the grass has given up on growing and the flies gather like tiny critics here to review your life choices. You and 3 others, Reynolds, Jenkins, and the unfortunate new recruit everyone's just calling Kid, spend the better part of an hour cutting into the earth, digging a trench that must be deep enough to meet standards, but not so deep that you hit the water table, which would apparently cause issues. You don't ask. You dig. The work is sweaty, back-breaking, and completely thankless. Your shirt clings to your back, your palms blister anew on the shovel handle. And the only reward is the knowledge that at some point today, you'll get to not think about this part again. Once you're done and the trench is ready for service, complete with wooden planks laid across for balance and a modest canvas screen for privacy that flaps in the wind like a cruel joke, you trudge back to camp with the aroma of your labor trailing behind you. You rinse your hands in the barrel near the mess tent, though rinse might be a generous word for what you do. The water is murky and smells faintly of soap and foot. Still, it's better than nothing. You splash your face too, try to wipe away the feeling of having spent the morning elbow deep in indignity. A few soldiers are lining up for inspection now, boots polished as best they can manage, buttons done up, beards roughly tamed. There's an odd kind of pride in it all. Even with mud on their cuffs and yesterday's beans in their teeth, the men stand tall, shoulders square, eyes forward. You join them, adjusting your jacket, running a hand through your hair in a futile attempt at tidiness. The captain walks past, eyes scanning like he's measuring each man's worth with invisible calipers. He pauses near Jenkins, squints at the scuff on his rifle, then moves on without a word. Jenkins exhales like he just passed an exam. After inspection, you finally get a brief moment of free time. What passes for leisure in this world? Some men use it to write letters. Others sharpen knives, mend torn shirts, or play cards with whatever scraps of paper and ink they manage to hang on to. You sit near the fire with Reynolds and the kid, who's still pale from latrine duty but trying to look tough. Jenkins is reading aloud from a small book of poetry he somehow kept dry during last week's rainstorm. His voice is surprisingly good, smooth, steady, a little dramatic. He gets through 2 stanzas before someone throws a pine cone at him, but you all laugh, even him. It's one of those rare, strange pockets of normalcy where war feels far away. The fire crackles, the sun breaks through the clouds, and for a few minutes, you could almost convince yourself you're just camping with friends who smell terrible. One established fact: camp maintenance was a full-time job, and poor sanitation was one of the deadliest enemies soldiers faced. Diarrhea and dysentery claimed more lives in the Civil War than bullets ever did. But here's a lesser-known quirk. Some regiments got creative. In an effort to keep spirits up while keeping camps clean, they'd hold informal latrine races, betting on which squad could dig the best trench the fastest. It was crude, weird, and definitely not regulation, but it brought a little levity to the bleakest tasks. Some even carved signs to decorate their makeshift toilets, with names like Fort Relief or the Thunderdome. Historians still debate whether the hygiene practices of the Civil War were ahead of their time for the era, or just barely good enough to prevent total disaster. There's still mystery around some of the more improvised methods, like using ashes for sanitation, or certain herbal poultices added to the latrines in hopes of fending off disease. You're not sure if it worked, but you're certain that being the guy on latrine duty wasn't any less miserable. The day drags on. The fire dies low. Clouds build in the distance, fat and gray like swollen cotton balls, and the promise of rain settles over the camp like a warning. You tighten the flaps on your tent, stake your bedroll with extra care, and tuck your letter from home into your breast pocket to keep it safe. A drizzle begins as the sun starts to dip, and you sit under a canvas sheet share between 4 men, huddled close as drops patter against the fabric with a rhythm that could almost lull you to sleep. Jenkins hums something tuneless. Reynolds carves a small bird into the side of his canteen, tongue sticking out in concentration. The kid, fast asleep already, has his head on your shoulder, and you let him. You're all just trying to make it through another day. One more campfire, one more night, one more step towards something you hope is peace. You wake with a damp blanket stuck to your face, the heavy scent of wet wool and last night's rain creeping into your nose like a sleepy house cat trying to suffocate you with affection. And for a blissful half second, you don't remember where you are. until your back reminds you that it spent the night wrestling the roots under your tent flap, and the grumble of distant voices snaps you back to camp life before your eyes have even fully opened. The rain has stopped, but it's left everything soggy and moody. The kind of morning where your socks squish before your boots are even on, and every step makes you question your life decisions. The ground beneath you is turned to a sticky brown sludge that grabs your heels with each motion, trying its best to suck you back into the earth. Your bedroll is soaked, your jacket feels like someone dipped it in soup, and the wind carries a damp chill that bites at your fingers like a scolding grandmother with a fondness for frostbite. You squint up at the sky, which offers no apology, just a thick quilt of gray clouds hanging low and brooding, as if the heavens themselves are reconsidering their life choices. Around you, other soldiers are starting to rise, peeling themselves out of their makeshift shelters with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Jenkins looks like he's aged 10 years overnight, wrapped in what might once have been a blanket, but now resembles a wet towel from a haunted hotel. Reynolds is already muttering curses to no one in particular while trying to keep his coffee tin upright on a rock that refuses to stay level. The kid's teeth are chattering as he tries to wring water from his socks, failing miserably and somehow making them wetter in the process. Today's assignment, because of course there's an assignment, is picket duty, which sounds deceptively gentle, like something involving flowers or maybe fence painting, but in reality means you'll be stationed just outside the main camp, watching for enemy movement, standing still for hours, and praying the local wildlife isn't feeling feisty. You gear up slowly, sliding into your soggy trousers with the resigned grace of a man dressing for his own tax audit. Your musket, which you wiped down last night, is already suspiciously moist again, like it's offended by the weather and taking it personally. Your cartridge box creaks, the leather swollen from humidity, and your cap droops forward slightly, its brim heavy with rainwater it refuses to release evenly. You grab your gear and shuffle off toward the assigned post, boots sucking at the mud with every step, each one making a noise that sounds like someone being mildly inconvenienced in slow motion. The march to the picket line isn't far, just enough to get you thoroughly damp again and give you time to regret every decision that led to you joining the army in the first place. The path winds through thin trees and grass that slaps at your legs like it's trying to start a fight. Birds flutter above, indifferent to your suffering, and a squirrel darts past with the kind of enthusiasm you haven't felt since before hardtack became a food group. Once you reach the picket station, a slightly elevated clearing with a view of the tree line, you get the rundown. Stand here, look there, don't fall asleep, and if you see anything suspicious, fire a warning shot and hope the rest of the camp hears it. Easy, just you, your musket, and the entire weight of potential doom resting casually on your shoulders. You take your post behind a felled log that serves as a makeshift barrier, settle your musket against the wood, and begin what is essentially a long, uncomfortable staring contest with an empty forest. The wind rustles the branches above, carrying the soft creak of leaves and the occasional drop of water slipping from canopy to earth. You shift slightly, trying to find a position that doesn't involve your backside going numb, and discover that no such position exists. So you settle for the one where your legs hurt less, your spine complains more, and you can still see the trail without squinting too much. Time drips by slower than syrup in a snowstorm. You watch the shadows dance on the trees, your ears tuned to every twig snap and squirrel chirp. At one point, a rabbit appears, stares at you like it's judging your posture, then disappears again with the grace of someone who's never had to share a tent with Jenkins. An hour in, your thoughts start to wander. You think about the letter in your coat pocket, folded so many times it's starting to wear at the creases. You reread it in your head, your sister's handwriting looping across your memory like a soft lullaby. You imagine home, the porch swing creaking, the scent of stew, the flicker of lantern light through the kitchen window. You imagine what you'd be doing if you were there. Probably chopping wood, probably complaining about it, Probably still happier than sitting in damp socks watching a squirrel dig holes with more purpose than you felt in weeks. A sharp rustle breaks the quiet, and your heart jumps. You raise your musket, peer through the trees, and see nothing. Just a deer, long-legged and cautious, ears flicking as it sniffs the wind. You lower your weapon slowly, exhale the tension, and watch it vanish into the underbrush. You wonder if it gets cold at night, if it knows the smell of gunpowder. Probably not. Lucky thing. Historically, picket duty was critical but dreaded. Soldiers feared it not just because of the boredom, but because it often meant being the first to see or get seen by the enemy. The duty could last hours, and in the dead of night or under the gloom of rain, every branch seemed to move, every shadow seemed to breathe. But here's the lesser-known detail. Soldiers often whispered to each other across lines. Union and Confederate pickets sometimes chatted in the dark, trading coffee for tobacco or jokes for silence, pretending for a moment that they weren't supposed to kill each other. It wasn't sanctioned and it wasn't common, but it happened, small human breaks in a system designed to crush humanity. Historians still wonder why these moments of connection were so rare, yet so consistent across wars. Was it weakness? Or a brief remembering that everyone out here was just someone else's son, someone's brother, someone trying not to freeze to death before dawn? You shift again, bones stiff, eyes dry. The forest hasn't changed. The wind still whispers through the grass. In the distance, a woodpecker hammers away, oblivious to the tension of the two worlds watching each other from the trees. You glance behind you. Nothing from camp. Just faint smoke and still figures, waiting for someone else to make the first noise. The hours pass slow as dried molasses. You start counting leaves, then branches, then the buttons on your jacket, which you've already memorized but feel like recounting just in case one disappeared. Your feet are numb now, your stomach grumbles, and your canteen is nearly empty. You take a sip anyway, even though the water is warm and metallic. You think about whistling, then don't. Too risky. Might alert the enemy. Might scare the rabbit. Might just remind you how long it's been since you last heard a song that wasn't someone snoring through their nose. Eventually, a runner appears from the camp, waving his arms and motioning for your shift to end. You nearly kiss him out of gratitude. You lower your musket, stand with a grunt, and stretch until your joints sound like someone cracking twigs under a blanket. The runner doesn't speak, just nods and takes your place behind the log. You nod back, pat his shoulder, and begin the slow walk back to camp, your boots squelching through the same familiar mud, your body weary, but your mind strangely calm. There's something about watching nothing happen for hours that reminds you how much something means. Back in camp, you hang your jacket to dry, shake the dew off your cap, and collapse onto your bedroll with the grace of a falling sack of potatoes. You stare up at the sky, the clouds finally thinning, and watch as a single bird cuts across the pale blue, wings wide free. You're halfway through scraping the last bit of hardtack crumbs from the bottom of your jacket pocket, a desperate act that would have embarrassed you back when you had access to fresh bread and dignity. When the sergeant strides into camp with a face that says someone's day is about to get a lot worse, and as luck would have it, that someone is, of course, you. You're chosen for today's special detail, which in true military fashion is never actually special in a way that's good. Turns out you'll be joining a small foraging party, which sounds vaguely pastoral, like you'll be strolling through fields picking daisies for the general's hat band. But what it really means is hiking to the nearest local homesteads under the excuse of requisitioning supplies, which is military speak for knocking on someone's door and asking, politely or otherwise, for food, livestock, or anything that isn't nailed down. You're handed a list of items that reads more like a fantasy than an inventory: salt, sugar, coffee, flour, bacon, and a small pouch of script vouchers to hand over in exchange. The vouchers are supposed to promise payment from the Army, though even the chickens seem to know better. The team consists of you, Reynolds, Jenkins, who immediately makes a joke about hunting for biscuits in the wild, and a new corporal named Mathers, who looks like he's been carved from leftover barn wood and has the sense of humor to match. The four of you are told to keep it civil, avoid confrontation, and not eat anything before reporting back. That last part feels personal. The sky is unusually clear as you set out, the sun finally deciding to behave like a proper sun and not a damp lantern behind fog. The path cuts through a mix of dirt road and grass trail, weaving past split-rail fences and overgrown ditches where frogs croak like tiny critics judging your every step. The land here is green, rolling gently, the kind of peaceful landscape that makes you wonder how a war even got near it. It's quiet too. Too quiet. Not the calm kind, but the everyone's hiding kind. A bird chirps from a nearby oak. Then silence again. You pass the occasional farmhouse, most with shutters closed and chimneys cold. The one has laundry still hanging from the line, a pair of overalls dancing in the breeze, stubbornly cheerful against the backdrop of uncertainty. At the first house, you knock on the door and wait. No answer. You knock again louder. Still nothing. Jenkins tries the door, which creaks open without resistance, and you're all hit with the smell of old potatoes and dust. The place is empty, abandoned, or just avoiding you. It's hard to say. You find a jar of pickled onions, a heel of cornbread, and a pair of boots that wouldn't survive half a mile of marching. Mathers leaves a script voucher on the table out of habit or guilt. You're not sure which. On the way out, Reynolds pockets a small Bible from the mantel, muttering something about a charm for the road. No one questions it. The next stop is a working farm. Cows in the pasture, smoke from the chimney, and a woman standing on the porch with arms folded so tightly she might snap in half. She doesn't wait for pleasantries. You boys here for more, or just passing by. Her voice is sharp, but not angry. Resigned, maybe. You explain you're with the Union Army, here on official requisition business, and offer the voucher before she even asks. She snorts. You planning to eat that paper, or just wave it at the chickens? Jenkins nearly laughs, but the look she gives him could crack stone. Still, she lets you walk the perimeter with her. She points out the smokehouse, already picked clean by the last detail, and says the garden might have a few turnips left if the groundhogs haven't gotten to them. She lets you take half a bag of cornmeal and one sad-looking chicken that Reynolds names Doris before it's even in the crate. Before you leave, she hands you a bundle of herbs and tells you to boil it into tea for coughs. You boys all sound like dying donkeys, she says, and though it's not affectionate, it's also not cruel. You thank her, and Jenkins, surprisingly, tips his hat with sincerity. You walk away, quietly, the sound of your boots the only farewell. Further down the road, you stop at a third home, this one flanked by 2 children playing in the dirt. They stare at you with a wide-eyed suspicion only kids can manage, half curious, half ready to run. Their mothers stand behind them, broom in hand like a saber. You assure her you're not here to cause trouble, just looking for basics. She says they've barely enough for themselves, and the look in her eyes convinces you it's true. Still, she gives you a jar of lard and a small pouch of dried beans. Jenkins leaves a full ration in return, actual food, not paper, and she nods once, eyes softer now. You catch the glint of a wedding ring and wonder where the husband is. Off at war? Gone entirely? You don't ask. You never ask. Historically, foraging was a standard but controversial tactic in Civil War campaigns. Both Union and Confederate armies depended on local resources to supplement their thin supplies, often straining relationships with civilians caught in the middle. Soldiers were ordered to maintain discipline, but the line between requisitioning and looting could blur quickly, especially when hunger gnawed at the rules. What most people don't know is that some regiments made a game out of it, tallying who brought back the best find. One unit even crowned a forage king each week, awarding them an old spoon strung on a rope as a trophy. Some historians still debate whether these tactics prolonged the war by alienating civilian populations or shortened it by keeping armies moving. Was it survival or opportunism? Was every jar of jam taken worth the trusted cost? The final stop of the day is a barn half collapsed under the weight of its own sorrow. Its roof slumped like it just got bad news. Inside, you find a few moldy apples, some rusted tools, and a mule that looks at you with the slow judgment of someone who's seen too much. You leave empty-handed, your boots crunching across broken boards and dust. Jenkins mutters that Doris is probably the highlight of the day. Reynolds hums a tune that might be a lullaby or might be nonsense. Mathers walks quietly, his face unreadable. The sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows that stretch across the road like tired arms reaching for home. You're tired too, bone deep, spirit worn tired, but you've done what you came to do. And no one died, which, by this war's standards, makes it a resounding success. You get back to camp just as the fireflies start blinking to life, their small golden pulses making the night feel a little less harsh. The chicken is handed over to the cook, who names it dinner and doesn't elaborate. The cornmeal, lard, and beans are added to the community stores. You're given half a cup of actual coffee as thanks, a luxury so rare it feels like a bribe from the universe. You sit by the fire, holding the tin cup like it's a holy relic, and sip slowly, letting the bitterness anchor you to the moment. Around you, the others unwind. Someone tells a joke about a pig in boots. Someone else starts snoring mid-sentence. You lean back against your pack, gaze up at the first stars, and feel a strange mix of satisfaction and shame. You didn't steal. You didn't take more than you gave. But still, you wonder what it feels like to watch strangers march up your path, poke through your pantry, and leave your table lighter than it was. You wonder if you'd be so generous, so patient. Probably not. Probably, you'd grab the broom too. The night settles around you like a blanket, scratchy, smoky, but warm. You rest your head against your rolled-up coat, listen to the soft crackle of the fire, and feel the ache in your legs start to fade. The sky above you is deep and endless, and for the first time in a while, you allow yourself to breathe slow and deep, like someone who might still belong to the world beyond this war. The bugle's sharp call slices through your sleep like a bayonet through soft bread, and you wake with a jolt, limbs tangled in your blanket, brain still somewhere between your dreams, and the very real fact that you slept outside, surrounded by grown men who all snore like broken accordions. Morning rolls in with its usual indifference, cold, damp, and full of the kind of gray light that makes everything look like it was washed in a bucket of dishwater. Your joints creak as you sit up, spine offering a protest in 12 different languages, and your mouth tastes like you chewed on your own boot sometime during the night. Around you, camp is already stirring. Fires are sputtering back to life, men groaning awake, smoke curling lazily into the cold air like a ghost that's forgotten what it was supposed to haunt. You pull on your jacket, it's still damp, and rub your arms as you wander toward the nearest fire for warmth and maybe something vaguely edible. Jenkins is already there, poking at the embers with a stick like they personally offended him. He nods at you, eyes bloodshot, and mutters something about his toes being permanently damp. You nod back, because there's nothing else to say. Your toes are damp too. Everyone's are. It's the unofficial mascot of camp life. Wet Foot Fred, the ghost who haunts your boots and dreams. Today's marching orders are pinned to a post like an accusation. Your unit's moving out deeper into contested territory, toward a ridge you've never heard of and probably don't want to. The name doesn't matter. These places only matter when men die on them. Until then, they're just hills with aspirations. You're told to pack light, keep your powder dry, and stay in line. No estagling, no sortkuts. There's a briefing from an officer who looks like he's never once marched with his own boots. And you do your best to listen while also finding a way to discreetly scratch the itchy patch under your collar. You're assigned to middle column, which means less chance of being picked off by snipers and more chance of stepping in whatever the front lines missed. The march begins mid-morning, boots squelching in mud, packs groaning under the strain, and the familiar rhythm of one foot, then the other again until the numbers blur and you stop thinking in words. The road you follow is more suggestion than reality. Pitted with holes, slick with clay, edged with brush that grabs at your sleeves like it wants to whisper secrets. The air smells of damp earth, rotting leaves, and the distant promise of gunpowder. Not a single bird sings. Marching is its own kind of madness. It starts simple: step, breathe, shift the weight of your musket, repeat. But after an hour, your thoughts start to unravel. Your legs ache in strange places. The straps of your gear dig trenches into your shoulders. You feel each toe individually, each one plotting rebellion. Sweat trickles down your back, collects in the waistband of your trousers, and refuses to evaporate. You stop noticing the scenery. Trees become background noise. The sky becomes a light bulb that flickers in and out behind clouds. You fall into a kind of waking trance, counting fence posts or Jenkins' off-key humming just to stay tethered to the moment. At some point, the road dips into a shallow valley, the canopy overhead thickening, and your boots sink deeper in a mud that grabs like hands. A wagon ahead gets stuck, its wheels spinning hopelessly. Men gather to push, grunting and swearing and slapping the mule like that'll help. You stand in line, waiting for the delay to clear, staring at your own feet like they might do something interesting. Jenkins makes a joke about the mud being so deep it might lead to China. No one laughs, but you smile anyway. It's something to do with your face. The column starts moving again, slower now. The air grows heavier. Your canteen sloshes against your hip. You ration your water, not because it's running out, but because drinking means you'll have to pee later, and stopping for that is a luxury you haven't earned. The march goes on. Hours bleed together. You pass the burned-out shell of a farmhouse, its chimney still standing like a gravestone. There's a charred rocking chair nearby, tilted back like someone invisible is still sitting there. You don't stop. You don't ask questions. The war's fingerprint is everywhere. Scorched trees, bullet-pocked fences, the occasional boot abandoned in the grass, half covered in moss like it's being reclaimed by the earth. You cross a narrow creek, using a footbridge made of planks barely wide enough for one man. The water below is cold and fast, rushing past as if it knows it needs to hurry away for whatever's coming. On the other side, the trail begins to climb, the incline steep enough to force you forward on instinct, head down, hands clutching your straps like lifelines. Your breath becomes shallower, your heart thuds louder, and each step becomes a tiny act of rebellion. Jenkins falls behind. Reynolds offers him a hand. You follow without speaking. The ridge isn't far now, but the road is cruel. At the top, you collapse onto a patch of flat ground, muscles trembling, lungs gasping like they've never breathed before. The view is impressive if you had the strength to enjoy it. Rolling hills, patches of distant farmland, a stream glittering in the sun like someone spilled silver on the grass. There's a distant shape on the horizon, maybe another unit, maybe trees. No one seems eager to find out. You take a swig from your canteen and lie back, staring at the sky through a gap in the trees. For a moment, you forget everything. The mud, the march, the war. Just you, the sky, and the whisper of wind through the leaves. Then the orders come. Move into position, form ranks, prepare for contact. You groan, roll to your knees, and begin the motions. Pack off. Bayonet fixed. Cartridge box checked. The ritual is mechanical now. Your hands moving before your mind catches up. The adrenaline hasn't kicked in yet. It's still hiding, waiting for the shooting to start. Marching, you remember, wasn't just about getting from place to place. It was strategic, psychological, a show of force and a test of endurance. The Union Army often covered 10 to 15 miles a day, sometimes more if pressed. But what's less known is the forced march, a punishing pace of 20 miles or more, usually under threat or in retreat. Soldiers learned to walk asleep, to rest while upright, to urinate without breaking stride. There were men who tied rope between themselves and the soldier ahead, so they wouldn't drift out of line when exhaustion blurred their vision. Some historians still argue whether these grueling marches cost more in fatigue than they gained in progress. Were they acts of discipline or desperation? Did they harden the soldiers, or did they break them slowly, one footstep at a time? Back in formation, the line begins to creep forward, inching through underbrush, rifles held low, breath caught in your throat. Every branch crack sounds like a musket. Every bird's call makes you flinch. But nothing comes. No enemy. No bullets. Just the waiting. And then word filters back through the ranks. False alarm. You're told to set up camp here instead. You let out a breath, so long it might qualify as wind. You begin the familiar routine. Clearing space, pitching what passes for a tent, gathering sticks for a fire that might not even get lit. Jenkins flops onto the dirt like he's been shot. Reynolds immediately takes off his boots and announces that if anyone so much as looks at them, he'll throw them into the woods. You laugh for real this time. Not because it's funny, but because it's safe enough to. Night comes slower on the ridge. The wind is sharper, the stars clearer. You boil what's left of your coffee with water from the creek. That tastes more moss than bean, but it's hot, and that's enough. You sit with the others, your legs outstretched, socks steaming near the fire. Someone hums. Someone writes. Jenkins sleeps with his mouth open. You lean back, eyes on the stars, and think of home. Not with longing, not this time. Just remembering. The way the barn creaked at night. The smell of bread from the kitchen. The old porch swing swaying in storms. You close your eyes and let the sounds of camp drift over you. Murmurs, footsteps, the occasional snore. And you feel something settle in your chest. Not peace exactly, but something close. You wake with your face half pressed into a tree root and your tongue glued to the roof of your mouth like someone snuck in overnight and replaced your saliva with dust. And before your brain even fully boots up, your nostrils are full of the cold tang of campfire ashes and wet canvas. An aroma you're starting to associate with both survival and profound discomfort. Your legs don't want to move. Your spine registers an official protest. But the unmistakable sound of boots stomping and metal clanking tells you rest time is over. And like it or not, you're about to participate in one of the Union Army's least glamorous rituals, drilling. Not the thrilling fix bayonets and storm the hill kind of drill, but the march in squares until your knees hate you sort of morning death march, meant to discipline, synchronize, and occasionally remind you which direction is left. You groan, sit up, and look around at the others. Every single one of them looks like they too just returned from wrestling a demon in their sleep. Reynolds is hunched over tying a boot that's missing a lace, mumbling something about ghosts stealing his socks. Jenkins, already munching a piece of something unidentifiable, offers you a nod that might mean good morning or we're all doomed, and you give him a grim half-smile in return. The kid sneezes violently into his sleeve and falls backwards off the log he was sitting on. Morale is clearly sky-high. Breakfast is the usual gray mush passed off as nourishment. Oats boiled with water, barely warm, and sprinkled with whatever passed for flavoring in this part of the country, which might actually be sawdust. You scarf it down anyway, because calories are fuel and complaining is wasted energy. Then it's time to fall into line. You shuffle into formation with your company, rifles slung over shoulders, boots scraping against gravel and mud, and listen as the sergeant starts barking the first of many familiar commands. Shoulder arms, right face, forward march. And just like that, you're moving again. Not to a destination this time, but in controlled, patterned loops across an open clearing marked off by sticks and rocks, like a military rehearsal gone absurd. The purpose is order, uniformity, muscle memory. March until your feet do it on their own. Turn until your body obeys before your brain can argue. The officers watch you like disappointed school teachers, correcting posture, snapping at hesitation, and shouting things like, "Keep the line straight," as if it's the only thing separating civilization from collapse. You suppress the urge to shout back that the ground is uneven, The boots are cursed, and the line would be straight if the world were fair. Hours pass like molasses over sandpaper. Your arms ache from holding your rifle. Your shoulders feel like they've been stretched by invisible goblins. Sweat rolls down your back in defiance of the chilly air, and your thighs have begun to tremble slightly from the effort of endless turns, halts, and about faces. You make eye contact with Jenkins at one point, and he mouths the words, "Send help," before spinning to face the other direction. The kid nearly drops his rifle during a turn and earns a 10-minute scolding from a corporal who somehow manages to look angrier than your grandfather that one time you broke his whiskey jug. At least Reynolds finds a way to amuse himself. He starts calling cadence under his breath, replacing the official commands with food-related wishes. 1, 2, beans and stew. 3, 4, pie for sure. It spreads through the ranks like wildfire. Even the captain doesn't seem to catch on. The entire unit is now marching in rhythm to the fantasy of gravy and hot bread. And it's the best morale boost you've had in weeks. Drilling wasn't just tradition, it was survival. The Civil War's rigid formations weren't just for show. They were necessary for communication, coordination, and firing efficiency in the chaos of battle. Units that drilled well moved like machines, and in combat that sometimes made the difference between life and disaster. What's less known is that these drills were often designed not just for battle readiness, but as a form of control, especially for newer, more unruly regiments. Officers knew bored soldiers became rowdy soldiers, and rowdy soldiers became problems. So drilling was also a kind of psychological bridle, a daily dose of obedience to remind everyone where the chain of command began and ended. Historians still debate how effective this was long-term. Did it foster loyalty or just fatigue? Was repetition the key to discipline or the slow erosion of a man's will to think for himself? After several eternities, drill finally ends with a series of shouted commands that dissolve into the sweet sound of dismissed, and you stagger out of formation like someone just lifted a curse. You collapse onto a tree stump with the kind of dramatic flair that would earn applause on a theater stage. Remove your cap and fan your face while pretending not to see the steam rising from your shirt. Jenkins joins you and immediately begins massaging his feet through his boots, making sounds that suggest he's negotiating with his ankles. The kid lies flat on the ground, arms spread wide, eyes closed, muttering that he's ascending. You don't correct him. You just drink water and stare at nothing. A breeze picks up, carrying the scent of pine and distant smoke. You wonder if there's another unit nearby. You hope they got a sleep in. Later, while recovering, you're assigned to another minor task, polishing the company's rifles and checking ammunition stores. It's tedious work, but at least you get to sit down. You pull a musket toward you, check its barrel, wipe the lock plate, and rewrap the flint. It's slow, repetitive, strangely satisfying. Cleaning metal gives you something to focus on, something that doesn't bark orders or ache when you bend. Jenkins is nearby, recounting a story about a soldier from another company who claimed he once saw a ghost walk through his tent flap without lifting it. Said it smelled like cinnamon. Jenkins says, dead serious. Swore it was his grandmother. Reynolds suggests maybe the man just dreamed about pie, and the whole thing spirals into a debate about whether the afterlife includes snacks. You suggest that if it doesn't, it's not worth going. Everyone agrees. Even Mathers, who's usually more stone-faced than a tomb marker, cracks a smile. As dusk falls, you finally finish your tasks, eat a thin stew of questionable origin, and settle in by the fire. The drills still echo in your muscles, each movement ghosting across your nerves like a memory, trying to remind you it was once important. You can feel yourself growing into this shape. Not just the physical changes, the calluses, the hunched shoulders, the permanent dirt under your nails, but the mental ones too. You follow orders faster now. You anticipate commands. You react, move, eat, sleep, and dream like a soldier. Whether that's good or not, well, historians still wonder about that part too. You stare into the flames, the wood crackling like distant musket fire, and feel the weight of that question settle in beside you. Who are you becoming? Not a killer, not yet, but not quite the person you were either. Somewhere in between, forged by repetition, discomfort, and the slow, grinding dance of military life. A breeze brushes past your cheek, soft and cool, carrying the scent of honeysuckle or maybe just someone's old soap. You lean back, letting the firelight flicker across your face, and listen to the murmurs of the men around you. Quiet jokes, tired laughter, the occasional hum of a tune someone's forgotten the words to. You close your eyes for a moment, just to rest them, and feel your thoughts drift like smoke. The stars begin to show, tiny pricks of silver in a navy sky. Somewhere out there, people are sleeping in real beds, eating real food, living real lives untouched by all of this. And here you are, dirty, sore, somehow still standing. And tomorrow, more marching, more drills, maybe a letter, if you're lucky, maybe something worse if you're not. But tonight, you've earned this small sliver of peace. You tuck your arms under your head, curl slightly against the cold, and let the rhythm of the fire lull you into stillness. You wake to a kind of quiet that feels suspicious, not peaceful, not restful, but the thick, cottony silence that comes before something you don't want to deal with, like a school teacher pausing before handing out test papers, or the moment your mother went quiet before a well-aimed shoe. So you open your eyes slowly, cautiously, like you're worried you'll catch the morning doing something it wasn't supposed to. The sky's still that early pale blue, washed thin by dawn, and the fire's died down to a few glowing coals, pulsing like the heartbeat of some exhausted forest spirit. Around you, the camp is still half asleep, blankets shifting, men murmuring, boots being located with the urgency of a dream still clinging to the edge of consciousness. You sit up, stretch with the stiff-limbed awkwardness of a man who definitely slept on a rock shaped like a loaf of stale bread, and immediately regret both the motion and the memory. Your back cracks. Your neck pops. Your left shoulder makes a noise so alien that Jenkins, already up and chewing on something that may or may not be food, raises an eyebrow. You're falling apart faster than a tent in a windstorm, he mutters, and you nod because he's right, and you're too tired to come up with anything clever. Breakfast is a limp biscuit with the structural integrity of a used napkin and a thin sliver of salt pork, which you chew while watching a beetle try to carry an entire breadcrumb uphill. It's somehow the most inspiring thing you've seen in days. Today, you're told, is a dig day. Not digging for treasure or vegetables or even a reasonable excuse to skip. No, you'll be digging fortifications. Earthworks, breastworks, trenches, whatever name they slap on it. It still means shovels in your hands and blisters on your palms before the sun reaches its highest point. You join the line of men trudging toward the designated spot, a rise in the landscape just shy of a wooded ridge, with a view of an open field that looks serene now, but might be covered in bodies by sunset if the rumors of an enemy push turn out to be true. You're handed a spade, the handle smooth from use and worryingly splintered near the grip, and you begin to dig. It starts slow, the shovel slicing into the earth, the scrape of metal against stone, the grunt of effort as the soil resists being moved. Then it becomes rhythmic. Step, dig, lift, throw. Dirt piles beside you like an offering to some grim, silent god of survival. Jenkins, a few feet away, mutters a steady stream of sarcastic commentary, mostly about how he never signed up to be a mole. Reynolds is already shirtless, his skin slick with sweat, cursing every tree root he encounters like it personally insulted his mother. The kid, predictably, overdoes it early and ends up wheezing beside a stump, face red as a boiled beet, trying not to pass out before lunch. The work is brutal. The sun climbs steadily, dragging the temperature with it, and soon your shirt is soaked through, your hands raw, and your back one bad twist away from permanent betrayal. The dirt is stubborn, clay heavy and streaked with stones, and your shovel finds every single one like it's got a personal vendetta. You pause only to wipe your forehead with a sleeve that's already damp and filthy, and for a moment you let your eyes wander. The field in front of you is still calm, but there's movement in the tree line, too far to make out clearly, but enough to set the officers pacing and muttering to one another. You go back to digging, because that's all there is. They through shift. The trench takes shape slowly, an ugly scar cut into the landscape by men too tired to be artists. You line it with logs dragged from the woods, stack dirt in mounds where it might stop a bullet, and wedge rocks into the sides to keep it from collapsing. It's ugly. It's rough. It might save your life. Earthworks became a signature feature of Civil War battle strategy, particularly in the later years when commanders realized the power of defense could outweigh the blood cost of offense. Soldiers dug by hand, miles of trenches and mounds, reinforced with timber and stone, shaped by sweat and fear. These structures weren't just practical, they were psychological. Being behind something, anything, gave soldiers a sliver more courage when facing lead. What's often overlooked is how creative the soldiers got. Some carved niches into the walls to stash extra ammo. Others built small fire holes for cooking, and one Union regiment reportedly built an underground oven beneath their trench line that smoked so little the enemy never noticed. Historians still debate whether these fortifications prolonged the war by turning battles into drawn-out slogs or saved lives by reducing the need for full frontal assaults. Did they make men safer, or just make it easier to wait to die? By mid-afternoon, your muscles are screaming, your clothes are crusted with sweat and soil, and you've long since stopped caring what you look like. You slump against a log wall, shovel resting across your knees, heart pounding like it's trying to escape through your ribs. Jenkins slides down beside you, eyes half-lidded, and offers you a chunk of something vaguely bread-like. "Think this trench will win us the war?" he asks, deadpan. "Probably not," you answer, "but it might help us keep breakfast inside our bodies a little longer." He nods solemnly, as though you've said something profound, then immediately drops his head back and snores. You close your eyes too, just for a second, and listen to the distant hum of men working, the metallic rhythm of shovels against earth, the occasional barked order from a sergeant who doesn't dig but insists he knows how you should be doing it. Your hands throb, your spine pulses, but there's also something deeply grounding, literally and otherwise, about digging the very space you might fight or fall in. The trench becomes more than protection. It becomes a line between what matters and what doesn't. Later, there's a break, and you and a few others are sent to gather brush and branches for camouflage. You venture into the edge of the forest, where the shadows stretch longer and cooler, and for a brief moment it feels like being in a place untouched by war. You can almost imagine walking through these woods under better circumstances, hunting, maybe, or hiking with someone you care about. You spot a squirrel darting up a tree, tail flicking, and Jenkins insists it winked at him. You find the right materials, limbs, leafy branches, bark, and return to layer the trench, hiding it from the view of any distant onlookers who might be preparing their own plans. By the time evening arrives, the work is done, or as done as it'll ever be. The trench is ugly, uneven, and somehow beautiful in its own desperate way. A place built with pain and hope and the collective desire not to be shot in the face tomorrow. You crawl into it and sit with your back against the wall, boots tucked up, arms resting on your knees, and feel strangely safe. You're lower than the earth around you. The wind moves above your head. The world, for a moment, is muffled. Dinner is brought down the line. Hardtack and beans, the traditional feast of the perpetually constipated. You eat without complaint. Hunger strips away pride. Jenkins tries to toast his hardtack over a candle and succeeds only in setting the corner on fire, which he eats anyway. Tastes better burned, he claims. Reynolds is writing something in his journal, poetry, or a list of things he'd rather be doing than digging trenches. The kid is asleep with his mouth open and dirt caked into his eyelashes. You stare at the fading sky, the last light catching on the treetops, and think about home again. You picture the garden, the fence, the window with the crack in the corner that used to catch the morning sun just right. You remember the way your father used to dig. Quiet, rhythmic, thoughtful. You wonder what he'd think of your trench. You hope he'd say it was a good one. As darkness rolls in, the trench becomes colder, but it also becomes yours. The air thickens with mist. The sounds of the camp grow hushed. You're ordered to stay low, keep quiet, listen for anything unusual. You pull your blanket tighter, lean your head back against the dirt wall, and watch the stars appear one by one. They're the same stars that hang over your family, over every battlefield, over the men on the other side of the line. That sameness is both comforting and cruel. Somewhere out there, someone else is digging too, probably cursing the same rocks, wiping the same sweat, wondering the same things. You breathe deep, let the earthy scent of fresh soil fill your lungs, and allow your eyes to close, if only for a moment. When the whisper starts, you're not even sure you're awake, just lying there at the bottom of a trench, half wrapped in a blanket that smells like mildew and regret. Your fingers still stiff from yesterday's shovel duty, eyes heavy but not quite closed, staring into that curious blue darkness right before dawn when everything feels a little too still, like the world is holding its breath. Then you hear it again, soft, strained, like wind trying to form words. You blink. There it is. Low murmurs from farther down the line. Not panicked, not loud, but different. And in the military, different is rarely good. You sit up slowly, brush dirt from your sleeve, and lean to listen. Jenkins is already upright beside you, rubbing his jaw like he's trying to squeeze some sense out of the situation. Something's moving out there, he mutters. You nod, already clutching your musket like it's a security blanket and not a barely functional weapon that might or might not fire if the humidity is in a good mood. The trench around you stirs with the sluggish energy of men rising too early from beds that aren't beds, waking to tension instead of sunbeams. Word comes down the line. Scouts spotted Confederate troops nearby, close enough to mean today won't be a nap and biscuits kind of day. You're ordered to fix bayonets. There's a quiet dread to it, that unmistakable metallic slide click that echoes down the trench like a drum roll at the gallows. Your hands move on their own, like they've been rehearsing for this moment in secret. The officers walk the line, hushed but quick, giving instructions that mostly boil down to hold the line and don't die, preferably. You take your position, crouched just below the lip of the trench, eyes scanning the field in front of you that yesterday was just scenery and today might become something you'll never forget for all the wrong reasons. The mist is thick, rolling across the grass like some slow, deliberate army of its own. Visibility's terrible. Good for hiding, bad for shooting. Your heart thuds once hard like a knock at the door, and then again and again and again until it's all you can hear. Your breath fogs in front of your face. Your fingers twitch around the barrel of your musket. And then movement. At first it's just shadows, blurred shapes against the fog. Could be deer, could be nightmares. But then comes the sound, boots crunching, branches snapping, voices low and purposeful. Enemy soldiers. No doubt now. You hear the shout. Maybe it's yours, maybe it's Jenkins, and everything explodes. Smoke, fire, screams. The first volley of gunfire is deafening. Muzzle flashes light the mist in brief, terrifying bursts. You fire blindly, the recoil jolting your shoulder like you've been punched by a ghost. You can't tell if you hit anything. You don't have time to care. You reload on instinct powder ball ramrod, your hands moving faster than your brain can keep up. Around you, men yell for ammunition, for cover, for God. The trench isn't deep enough. The wall's too soft. The earth shakes under the thud of cannon fire from somewhere behind. Dirt sprays into the air. Someone groans nearby. You don't look. You can't. You reload again. Fire again. The smoke gets thicker. Your eyes burn. You can barely see Jenkins anymore. Just hear his ragged breathing and the occasional string of swearing so inventive it could earn him a medal. This skirmish isn't full-scale battle. It's messy, disorganized, brutal in its confusion. You're not advancing or retreating. You're holding a line dug by hand in a patch of nowhere, defending nothing more than position and pride and the hope that tomorrow you won't have to do this again. Gunfire crackles and pops like angry fireworks. The enemy comes close enough you can see faces, just for seconds, glimpses between trees, through smoke. Young, old, bearded, terrified. They're men, just like you, and they're trying to kill you. You squeeze the trigger again. The musket misfires. You curse, dig into your cartridge box, try again. Around you, the line is starting to bend. Not break, but bend like something under too much weight. Officers shout orders no one can follow. A cannonball winds overhead like a banshee and explodes somewhere behind. You duck. Dirt rains down. Someone screams a name. Another voice answers. Maybe, maybe not. You reload again. Always reload. Eventually, blessedly, the sound begins to thin. The firing becomes sporadic, scattered. Less return fire, less yelling. The enemy's pulling back, maybe regrouping, maybe giving up. You don't cheer. No one does. You just stay low, frozen in place, musket across your knees, smoke swirling around you like the ghost of what almost was. When the order to stand down comes, it feels premature, like you're rising from a dream you weren't finished having. A nightmare still bleeding around the edges. You climb out of the trench and immediately feel like you've stepped into another world. Bodies lie across the field, some moving, most not. You count them without meaning to. 1, 2, 4, stop. You look away. Jenkins is wiping his face with a sleeve, leaving a long smear of black powder across his cheek. Reynolds is missing his cap. The kid is pale, shaking, gripping his musket so tightly his knuckles are bloodless. But they're all standing, still here. As you regroup, the medics arrive, quiet men with determined eyes and stained hands. They move through the lines, checking, tending, lifting. You do your best to help. Carry water, hold a blanket, press down on something bleeding until someone tells you it's enough. The field is a strange, kind of quiet now, filled with low groans and whispered prayers and the occasional sob that catches in the throat like a misfired round. No music, no birds, just men try not to fall apart while standing ankle deep in the evidence that some already have. You sit eventually because standing feels impossible. The trench looks different now, scorched in places, darkened with ash, but still standing. It held. You held. You're still here. Skirmishes like this weren't uncommon during the war. Brief, violent clashes that didn't make headlines but chipped away at armies, morale, and men's minds. Some historians call them testing the lines. Others call them reminders. Either way, they were part of the rhythm of war. Fire, fall back, regroup, repeat. One lesser-known account tells a unit that passed a battlefield the morning after and found a chicken calmly roosting on a fallen cannon, as if nothing had happened. They took it with them, named it General Peck, and swore it brought them luck. Historians still argue whether these small skirmishes changed anything strategically or simply drained energy for the next big fight. Were they warning shots or just bloody habits? You spend the rest of the day in a daze. Cleaning your weapon, eating without tasting, writing a letter you won't finish. You try not to count the ones who didn't come back. You try not to notice the space beside you that Jenkins used to fill when he took a break, or how Reynolds is quieter now, like someone turned down his volume knob. You try not to think about what you did, what you saw, what almost happened. You fail, but you keep trying, because that's what you do now. You endure. You adjust. You dig. You drill. You fight. And then you sit in the dirt and hope tomorrow is quieter. That night, as the firelight flickers across weary faces and the mist creeps back in, you find yourself staring at your hands. Still shaking. Still yours. You wonder how many times they'll have to reload, How many times they'll have to steady themselves against the wood of a trench or the weight of a musket or the grief of someone not coming back. You don't know. No one does. But for tonight, they're still your hands. And they still work. And the stars are still above you, scattered across the sky like a map you can't quite read, but one that still leads somewhere. Somewhere past the smoke. Somewhere past the war. The morning after a skirmish is not a morning in the traditional sense of the word. It doesn't come with sunlight or birdsong or the comforting clatter of breakfast pans, but rather with the lingering scent of black powder, the metallic tang of blood dried into uniform sleeves, and a quiet that hums low and hollow like a warning. You wake stiff, your blanket half off your body and half buried in the trench wall where it slid during the night. Your back sore from leaning against packed earth, and your muscles aching with the kind of fatigue that no amount of sleep could ever truly fix. Around you, the men are slow to stir, slower than usual, each of them carrying the weight of what happened yesterday in their faces, blank-eyed, jaw-tight, movements cautious and mechanical, like their minds are still back in the smoke and chaos. Jenkins is awake, but silent, fiddling with the same strip of cloth he's been using to patch the frayed edge of his rifle sling for days now. Reynolds is bent over, writing again, his expression unreadable as his pencil scratches against the back of a discarded ration wrapper. The kid is sitting very still, staring out across the field with an expression you can't quite name, but one that seems to age him a few years with every breath. No one talks about what they saw. No one talks about who didn't make it back. There are names that won't be said today, maybe not ever again in this camp, as if the absence of sound can hold back the weight of loss. You stand, slowly, stretch until your joints pop, and go about your morning chores in a haze, cleaning your weapon, folding your blanket, checking your cartridge box. Not because you're ordered to, but because the routine holds you together like stitching on a threadbare coat. The day's orders finally come, bark down the line without ceremony, stand ready to move. The trench will be abandoned. This doesn't surprise anyone. The war isn't about holding ground so much as showing up, surviving, and repeating the process somewhere slightly more miserable. You pack your things in silence, shoulders hunched against the morning wind, and look one last time at the trench that kept you alive just long enough to leave it behind. It's pocked now, scarred with bullet marks, charred in places, and still damp from the blood of someone whose name you probably won't ever learn. It isn't reverent, exactly, but you feel something settle in your chest as you look at it, some mixture of gratitude, guilt, and resignation. And then you march. The column stretches out like a long, ragged snake, winding through forest paths and open clearings, past places you hope you won't have to return to, and toward places you'll pretend not to dread. Your boots are heavier today. You're packed, too. Even your rifle seems to sag in your hands. It's not just physical. It's the slow accrual of hours, of miles, of names and faces and sounds you wish you could forget. You pass a burned-out farmhouse, just timbers and ash, the smell still faint in the breeze. And Reynolds mutters that it must have been beautiful once. Jenkins suggests sarcastically that they probably had curtains. You chuckle, mostly because it's easier than admitting that he's right. You keep walking. The world doesn't change much. Trees, dirt, the occasional bird that seems to regret being anywhere near here. And then, in the late afternoon, you reach a new encampment, a wide open space nestled between low hills, with enough tree cover to feel defensible and just enough grass left to soften the mud. You're told this is where you'll set up. The relief is muted. No one cheers. You drop your pack with a grunt and immediately begin the now ingrained routine. Pitch a tent if you have one, find water, look for wood, stack your things in a way that suggests order even if you're crumbling inside. The kid finally speaks, a quiet question about whether they'll let you dig trenches again here. You don't know the answer. You just shrug. The officers are already pacing, pointing, measuring distances with steps. The air smells like wet canvas, tree sap, and the faint smoke of another company's campfires drifting from the next hill over. Later, you're assigned guard duty, second watch, midnight to 3. The worst shift. The one that breaks your sleep in two and leaves you groggy both before and after. You try to nap in the evening, curled under your blanket with your cap pulled low over your eyes, but your mind won't let you rest. Every time you close your eyes, you see yesterday. The fog, the flashes, the face of a young Confederate soldier, eyes wide with fear, caught in your sights for a split second before you pull the trigger. Did you hit him? Did he duck? You'll never know, but the memory burns anyway. You shift onto your side, adjust your blanket, try again. Eventually, the exhaustion drags you under for a little while, but it's not real sleep. It's the heavy, muddled kind that leaves you more tired than before. Your shift begins in darkness, the stars overhead sharp and bright against the ink-black sky. The moon's low tonight, barely more than a sliver. You walk the perimeter in slow, careful steps, rifle slung but ready, boots crunching softly on fallen leaves. The world is quiet, but not silent. You hear the rustle of small animals in the underbrush, the distant crack of branches, maybe a bird ruffling its feathers in its sleep. You listen harder. No voices, no movement in the trees. Still, your muscles remain tense. Your eyes flick constantly between shadows. Guard duty is a strange kind of torture, not because of the danger, but because of the waiting. It's an invitation for your mind to wander, and wander it does. You think about home, about the kitchen table, the creak out back, the way the wind used to sound through the shutters during storms. You think about your family, about what they know or don't know, about whether they'd recognize you now. You've changed, not just in how you look, but in how you carry yourself. The version of you that left home wouldn't have stood so still in the dark without panicking. Wouldn't have known how to tell the difference between a squirrel's rustle and a man's approach. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, you hear footsteps. Soft, measured. You raise your musket instinctively, heart pounding. Then the whisper, Union. Friend, it's the relief guard. You exhale, shoulders dropping. You nod and step aside, walking back toward camp with limbs so tired they feel rubbery. You crawl into your blanket without speaking, curl tightly against the cold, and fall into a deep, dreamless sleep within minutes. In the morning, everything hurts again, but differently. The soreness is deeper, the fatigue more stubborn. Jenkins greets you with a nod and a mug of coffee, so then it might just be hot water that once sat near beans. You drink it anyway. It helps. Sort of. The day passes slowly. You're not marching today, nor digging. Just waiting. Cleaning gear. Sharpening bayonets. Patching holes in trousers that were too thin to begin with. You sew a button back onto your shirt, fingers fumbling with a needle, surprised at how satisfying it is to fix something so small. Jenkins is attempting to write a letter, tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth in concentration. Reynolds reads from a pocket Bible, mouthing the words but not saying them aloud. The kid naps openly, his rifle resting across his lap like a cat he's trying to tame. At one point, an officer comes around to read a list of names, commendations for bravery during the last skirmish. Your name isn't on it, but neither is anyone else's from your immediate group. You're not surprised. You're not disappointed. You're just here. Life in a Civil War camp between battles was paradoxically both the most bearable and most grueling part of a soldier's existence. Days dragged with boredom. Illness spread faster than gossip. And yet these moments were often the only chance to rest, to breathe, to remember that there was something beyond the musket's reach. One lesser-known fact is that many soldiers used their downtime to form impromptu music groups, harmonica duos, makeshift banjo players, or even spoons bands. In one notable regiment, they organized a mock theater performance using hand-stitched costumes made from flour sacks. Historians still debate whether these periods of idleness helped morale or made the waiting more painful. Did they offer hope or only remind the men what they were missing? That night, as the fire crackles and someone hums an old tune you don't quite remember the words to, You lie on your back and stare at the stars again. Same as always. But something shifted. You feel quieter. Not numb, but still. Like a pond after a storm. You can't tell if you're healing or just growing used to the bruises. Either way, you pull your blanket tighter, exhale slowly, and let the darkness fold over you like a second skin. By the time the bugle cuts through the still morning air, flat and scratchy like it was played through a tin funnel instead of an instrument, you're already awake, lying on your back with your eyes open, watching the clouds shift slowly across the pale sky, as if the heavens themselves are too tired to rush. Your body aches, of course. That's not new. There's a kink in your neck that's been migrating steadily down your spine for a week now, and your boots feel like they've shrunk 2 sizes overnight. But you're learning not to fight the discomfort anymore. It's not going away, and pretending it might is just wasted effort. So instead, you sit up, stretch until something pops, and breathe in the morning air, cold, damp, tinged with the smell of wood smoke and wet leather. Breakfast is a soggy biscuit and a tin mug of something resembling coffee if you close your eyes and pretend hard enough. Jenkins calls it being water's ghost, and no one argues. The camp is stirring now, a slow-motion ballet of groaning soldiers, yawns, and the soft clink of canteens and mess kits. There's no sense of urgency, no surprise. You all know what today is. The march. Marching isn't glamorous. It's not heroic. It doesn't come with swelling music or dramatic speeches. It's just walking. Endless, dusty, soul-draining walking, with your pack pulling on your shoulders like it's trying to drag you back into the earth, and your musket thumping against your side, with every step like a metronome marking the slow descent of your sanity. You line up as always, file after file of hollow-eyed men in blue wool, and wait for the command to move. When it comes, it's almost a relief. Standing in anticipation is worse than the act itself. The line lurches forward like a great groaning beast, boots squelching in mud, rifles rattling, and you begin again. Step, step, step. The road ahead disappears into a haze of dust, kicked up by the men in front and swirling around your face like dry smoke. You cough into your sleeve and keep going. Jenkins, beside you, mutters something about needing new socks. Reynolds is already limping. The kid has a piece of string tied around his wrist that he swears brings good luck. You don't say anything. You just walk. Hours pass. Time blurs. Your world shrinks to your boots, the men in front of you, and the dull ache building behind your eyes. Trees give way to fields, then back to trees. Occasionally, a bird will call overhead, and for a moment, the world feels alive again. But mostly, it's just the march, the routine, the ritual, one foot than the other. You develop tricks to cope, counting steps, humming old tunes, reciting letters you never sent. Jenkins starts naming the rocks along the side of the road. He gives them full names and backstories, like Reginald Pebblestone III, heir to the gravel shear fortune, which earns a few tired chuckles. Laughter doesn't last long out here, but you take what you can get. Somewhere in the distance, you hear cannon fire, faint, almost like thunder. No one reacts. It's far enough not to matter. Today, but it's a reminder. There's always something ahead. Another field, another trench, another chance to not come back. The midday sun is relentless. Your uniform, already damp with sweat, begins to chafe. Your canteen's half empty, and you sip it slowly, rationing like a man who knows there might be none tomorrow. You pass a farmhouse, abandoned, shutters hanging like crooked teeth, and catch the scent of wildflowers growing in what used to be someone's front yard. You wonder about them, who live there, what they left behind, if they'll ever come back. The war has a way of swallowing places whole, leaving only ghosts and silence. You step over a broken fence post and keep walking. Always walking. The kid stumbles on a root and nearly falls. Jenkins catches him. You don't even break stride. Your feet hurt too much to care. And you think, not for the first time, about why you're here. About how long you've been walking. About where it all ends. Civil War soldiers often marched over 20 miles a day through rain, snow, blistering heat, and unspeakable fatigue. They called their feet sore soldiers, and many removed their boots during rest breaks only to find their socks fused to their skin with blisters and blood. The roads were rough, poorly maintained, often muddy or frozen depending on the season. Horses collapsed, wagons broke, men fainted. What's rarely mentioned is how marching became a strange form of meditation, a grim, painful kind of therapy where the body suffered so the mind wouldn't have to. Some regiments reportedly marched while singing body tunes or chanting nonsense to keep rhythm. One group was known for marching with a pet goat at the front of the line, claiming it was better than a drummer boy. Historians still wonder if this ceaseless movement was a strategy or simply necessity. Was it about positioning, or just something to keep soldiers from sitting still long enough to remember the things they missed? Eventually, mercifully, the order comes to halt. The column slows, stops, breathes as one. You drop to the ground like it's the finest feather bed money could buy. Peel off your pack and lay back in the grass with your arms splayed like a man shipwrecked. Your feet throb in time with your heartbeat. You consider removing your boots, then remember yesterday's blisters and think better of it. Jenkins flops down beside you, eyes closed, lips moving silently as he counts the clouds. Reynolds mutters about his ankles. The kid lies flat on his back, hat over his face, softly humming the tune of a lullaby none of you will admit to knowing. You doze off briefly, jolted awake by a fly landing on your nose, and realize the sky has shifted slightly. Afternoon now. Still hours to go. You eat a hardtack biscuit with all the joy of chewing cardboard and wash it down with the last of your canteen. The water's warm. It tastes like rust, but you drink it anyway, because thirst doesn't care about taste. March resumes. The sun starts to dip, casting long shadows across the road. The mood grows quieter, heavier. Fatigue is setting in deep in the bones and in the mind. You stop talking, stop thinking really, just walking. Eyes glazed, feet numb, arms hanging like dead weight. Jenkins stops naming rocks. The kid walks with his mouth open, too tired to close it. A group of cavalry passes in the opposite direction, dust trailing behind them, their faces just as worn, just as blank. You wonder where they're headed. You wonder what they've seen. You wonder if you'll end up there too. The air cools as night approaches. Crickets begin to chirp. The scent of pine fills your nose as the path dips into another forested stretch. The sound of marching fades to a shuffle, a drag, a whisper. You're ghosts now, moving through the dark. Finally, when you think your legs might simply stop responding, the call comes to make camp. Relief rolls through you like a wave, and you drop your gear without ceremony, without grace, without care. You sit on the ground and stare at nothing for a full 10 minutes, just letting your mind catch up to your body. When you finally move, it's to gather wood, start a fire, warm your hands. Someone hands you stew in a dented tin bowl, thin, greasy, but warm. You eat in silence, grateful. Around you, others are doing the same. Fires crackle, shadows dance. The night smells of smoke and sweat and tired men trying to forget the march. Someone plays a harmonica, badly. It's the best sound you've heard all day. You lie down eventually, blanket tucked around you, head resting on your rolled-up coat. The stars are bright again, spread across the sky like they're showing off. You trace patterns with your finger in the air, constellations you barely remember the names of. You think about home, about rest, about what it would be like to walk somewhere and stay there. No orders, no drums, no more boots, just silence. You close your eyes and let your breathing slow. Let the firelight fade behind your eyelids. Let the ache in your legs blur into the softness of sleep. Because tomorrow, you'll march again. But tonight, you're still. You're half awake again before dawn, lying in the damp, half-sheltered pocket of earth that's temporarily your bed, watching your breath coil into the crisp morning air like a fading ghost. The fire is only embers now, a soft orange pulse in the dark, and someone snoring nearby with the rhythmic determination of a man who knows this might be the last decent sleep he gets for a while. You don't move, not right away. You just stay there, cocooned in your damp blanket, feeling the familiar stiffness in your joints, the pressure in your lower back, the ache in your shoulders that's almost comforting by now. There's something about mornings like this, before the orders, before the noise, that's oddly peaceful. The world hasn't quite started yet. No yelling, no marching, no gunfire. Just the quiet creak of trees in the breeze, the occasional distant owl still claiming its territory, and the slow, sleepy stirring of men who look older each day, even the ones barely shaving. You sit up, slowly, joints cracking like popcorn, and stretch until something twinges in your side. Your shirt is damp with sweat from yesterday, but it's cold now, sticking to your skin in the most unpleasant way. You shake the stiffness from your hands and rub the grit from your eyes. The day is beginning again, and so are you. Today's orders are different. No marching, no digging, no skirmishing. Instead, you're told you'll be rotating to a temporary reserve post behind the front. A few days rest, if you can call it that, in a barnyard-turned-supply depot about 6 miles back. No one cheers, but the news settles over the men like warm ash, a quiet sense of relief in its simplest form. You pack up quickly, efficiently, as you've learned to do, slinging your gear over one shoulder, musket over the other, tying off your blanket roll with practiced hands. Jenkins raises an eyebrow at the mention of rest, muttering something about how last time that meant carrying boxes of hardtack up a hill, but you both know it's better than walking straight into another battlefield. As the column forms, there's a strange lightness in the air. Not joy exactly, but something close enough to pretend. You step in line and begin the short march through forest and field, your boots thudding rhythmically in the soft soil, your thoughts drifting somewhere far from here. Maybe to home, maybe to what's next, maybe just to the idea of clean socks. The reserve station turns out to be just as ramshackle as you expected. A few leaning sheds, some battered carts, a rough pen of supply crates stacked under half-collapsed lean-to, and a barn that smells more like dried blood than hay. Still, it's quiet here. No immediate threat. No trenches. No cannon fire. You settle into the rhythm of rear duty quickly. Unloading wagons, counting tins of food, sweeping out spaces that look like they haven't seen a broom in years. You even get the rarest of luxuries, a bath. It's a cold one, in a barrel behind the barn, with soap that smells like mothballs and disappointment, but it scrapes away a few layers of filth and makes you feel marginally more human. The kid scrubs his hair so hard he almost loses a chunk. Jenkins refuses to use soap at all and claims water alone is nature's cleanser, despite the overwhelming evidence on his neck that nature isn't trying hard enough. You change into your second shirt, the less holy one, and hang the other to dry beside a line of socks that flap like surrender flags in the wind. You write a letter that night, not because you have anything new to say, but because your hands need something to do besides shake. You sit under a tree, paper resting on your knee, and write slowly, carefully, as if each word might be your last. You mention the trench, the march, the stew that tasted like boot leather. You don't mention the skirmish. You don't mention the face and the smoke or the sound a man makes when he realizes he's bleeding too much to stay. You keep it light, even throw in a joke about Jenkins trying to make tea from boiled grass. You sign it, fold it, and hand it to the courier wagon the next morning. Maybe it gets there, maybe not. Either way, you feel better having written it. Like a piece of you made it out, just in case you don't. Over the next few days, the camp becomes a place of small comforts. Someone finds a dog wandering the edge of the woods, skinny, half-blind, but friendly, and she quickly becomes the mascot. The men name her Glory, which is ironic because she spends most of her time sleeping under the wagon and ignoring everyone unless they have scraps. Jenkins tries to teach her tricks. She teaches him indifference, A group of musicians from another unit pass through and spend an evening playing fiddle and harmonica around the fire. You don't dance, no one really does, but there's foot tapping, some clapping, even laughter that doesn't sound forced. You lie back on your blanket, stare at the stars, and let the music drift over you like a breeze. You almost forget for a minute. Almost. The thing is, even in rest, the war doesn't leave you alone. You dream about it now. Foggy dreams where you can't reload fast enough, where the trench collapses, where you're running but not moving. You wake up with your heart racing, fingers twitching like they're still holding a musket. Jenkins says he dreams about food instead. Pies mostly, and something he swears is a roast duck with lemon glaze. You don't ask how he knows what lemon glaze tastes like. Reynolds admits he hasn't dreamed at all in weeks. He says it like he's bragging, but his eyes say otherwise. The kid says nothing. He just carves little shapes into a piece of what he carries around. Animals, mostly. There's a rabbit now, half finished, sitting on his bedroll like a quiet apology. You don't talk much about what comes next, but you all know it's coming. The front. The orders. The march back into the thick of it. This brief pause is just that, a pause. Not an end. Eventually the call comes. Not sudden, not unexpected. Just a new set of orders printed and passed down the line. Pack up. Move out. Return to your regiment. The mood is subdued, the joking quieter, the footsteps heavier. But you go. You always go. You repack your gear with the same methodical efficiency, your hands finding their old rhythm. You check your ammunition. You oil your rifle. You eat a rushed meal that tastes like salt and ash and say goodbye to the dog, who watches you leave without moving. Back into formation. Back on the road. The forest closes in again, and the sound of boots on dirt fills the air like a drumbeat. Step, step, step. It feels different now. Not worse, just sharper, like your senses have recalibrated during the break. The air smells more metallic. The light seems more brittle. You're more aware of the weight of your pack, the tightness of your boots, the rasp of fabric against your neck. But your mind is quieter, calmer. There's a strange steadiness in your chest. Not courage, maybe, but acceptance. You're not walking toward glory. You're not walking toward victory. You're walking because this is what you do. Because the man next to you is walking too. And because someone has to carry this story forward. The sky darkens. The wind picks up. A storm's coming. You can feel in your knees. Jenkins mutters something about the air smelling like wet canvas. You smile despite yourself. You don't know what the next fight will bring. You don't know who'll come back. But for now, you're still here. Still walking. Still breathing. Still holding on to the tiny, stubborn hope that this too might end someday. That the war might finally go quiet. That you might live long enough to sit in a field that isn't full of ghosts and plant something that doesn't grow from blood. That you might be more than a uniform. More than a number. More than a name scratched on a canteen. For now, though, you just march. One step, then another. And now, as the sounds of that long, muddy road fade behind you, your breath begins to slow, deep, soft, and steady, like the slow roll of fog over a field at dawn. The fire is burning low again, flickering gently in the distance, its warm glow casting faint shadows across the backs of tents and the silhouettes of men too tired to speak. The night stretches out around you, quiet and still, and your body, sore, weathered, wrapped in layers of scratchy wool and quiet victories, begins to relax. The rhythm of marching fades, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves overhead, the steady chirp of distant crickets, and the occasional hoot of an owl claiming its perch in the trees. You shift slightly into your blanket, finding just the right fold, just the right bit of softness beneath your shoulder, and let go. There's nothing to carry now. No musket, no buck, no orders. Just you, your breath, and the slow unwinding of every tense muscle that has carried you this far. You made it. Through rain, through fire, through the endless steps and silent nights. You're here, safe for now, resting at last. You feel the warmth of the earth beneath you, sturdy and still, and imagine the stars above slowly dimming as your eyes begin to close. Let them. Let the light slip into shadow. Let the world fall away, inch by inch. You're not in a trench anymore. You're not on a road. You're in a place beyond war, beyond worry. A quiet space made just for you. Inhale slowly. Hold. Exhale even slower. Again, imagine a gentle breeze drifting across a field, bending tall grass, rustling the edges of your coat. The air smells like pine and ash and a faint trace of home. Somewhere in the distance, a river moves at its own slow pace. And here, under the shelter of trees, beneath a sky full of scattered stars, you finally allow yourself to rest. You've done enough for today. More than enough.